Hey, welcome.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, morning. Thank you for joining us today. We get started shortly. People are still coming in. We have a lot to discuss.
And I can start putting the prompt in the chat if you want, Jackie.
Sure. Yeah, feel free to start introducing yourself in the chat, name, pronouns, organizations. If there's anything you want to share about you're doing for self-care, much needed at this point in time. Good morning, good morning. I don't know if people are newly coming in. Great. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. Good morning. If you just came in, welcome. You can add your name, organization, pronouns. And if you want to add anything you're doing for self-care, you can put that in the chat.
I'll share a couple that we have in the chat. Thank you all for sharing. I know Jennifer Peck shared self-care for them is calling their member of Congress, expressing their outrage. So, that's one way. Yes, definitely.
Yes, let it out, let it out.
Frank Escamilla said street poets in director of school programs. Lots of hugs. Yes, please. At this time, I feel like we need lots of hugs. I know Elisa from CBE Sella shared sleeping. Definitely, let's get her. If you could aim for the 8 hours, that's golden. Welcome,
Um,
welcome, folks.
yeah, I think we'll give it maybe one more minute and then I'll kick it to Jenny to get started. Yeah, welcome. Welcome. If you just joined us, you can add your introductions in the chat. Um, so welcome everybody. Our intro to ExpandLA, I think many of you already know who we are, so we just put a slide in here in case some of you do not who we are, but I'm Jackie Cohen. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Programs for ExpandLA, and I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Jenny Marroquin. She's going to be our leader for today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jackie. Welcome, everybody. We are really, really excited to gather as a community to do some learning, some sharing best practices. I'll be going through the agenda in a second, but definitely want to have our fearless leader, Rochelle Rios, open us with a small opening for space.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's great to see so many familiar and new faces today, and it's inspiring to be in a room filled with so many dedicated leaders who care deeply about our youth and families in LA. I'm going to share briefly why we decided to focus the theme of this convening on advocacy and collective action. As an intermediary organization, we connect nonprofit youth-serving organizations with each other for greater collaboration and resource sharing. We offer support in the form of professional learning opportunities, and we work to strengthen the workforce through capacity building and creating career pathways into the expanded learning sector. Another important focus of our work is advocacy. Our advocacy efforts at the local, state, and federal levels focus on amplifying the needs of the expanded learning sector, protecting and expanding critical funding streams, and shaping policies that lift up the field. Beyond policy work, we foster collaboration across sectors, bringing together expanded learning providers, educators, and community members to align efforts and share best practices. Through our coalition building and mobilization, we work to ensure that decision makers understand the impact and importance of expanded learning in supporting student success and community resilience. Our role is not only to advocate for the present needs of our field, but also to push for long-term systemic changes that will sustain and grow expanded learning opportunities for generations. By leveraging our networks, our expertise, and collective voice, we can help shape a policy landscape where expanded learning is recognized as a vital part of a young person's education and development. And needless to say, I don't have to really say this out loud, but we are at a critical moment for our sector and for our country. Across the country, expanded learning programs continue to be a lifeline for youth and families. And we have seen, even in these short 2-3 weeks, how state and federal funding policies and legislative decisions directly impact expanded learning programs and the young people that we serve. As a sector, we must ensure that our voices are heard because our ability to protect and grow these programs depends on a strong policy and advocacy strategy at all levels of government. And that's why this space is so important. We are going to have a chance to hear from policy experts about the current political and legislative landscape in DC and California. We will have time to dialogue, to have conversations with each other and begin to strategize how we can mobilize as a collective force to advocate for expanded learning. Together, we have the power to rise up and influence decision makers and drive policies that will benefit the children, families, and communities that we serve. So thank you again for joining us today. I'm going to now turn the mic over to Jenny Marroquin. I'm going to give it back to her. She will run through the agenda and also introduce our first set of speakers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rochelle. Some silent clapping. Melissa, if we can go to skip 3 slides. My name is Jenny Marroquin, pronouns ella, she. We definitely want to encourage folks to drop their name, pronouns in the chat. We're going to be engaging in shared spaces, so we want to make sure to start getting those norms in practice. I'm the current Director of Policy and Advocacy, born and raised in LA. So someone who has been in the after-school programs that you all run, who benefit from having amazing teams like the ones you all lead, led by amazing executive directors and directors in all levels. So definitely have a personal connection to the work that we're doing and the work that I hope to continue to do to support our network. So in the next slide, we're gonna be going through the agenda for today just to give everybody an overview. After the welcome and icebreaker, we're gonna be jumping into our overview of the political and legislative landscape that Rochelle was just touching on. We have Every Hour Counts and Partnership for Children and Youth who are going to be leading that discussion. After that space, which I'll break down further, we will have a ExpandLA effort. So we want to make sure we're keeping you all in the loop about what are we doing? What are the next steps? What are some opportunities to get involved? And then we're going to close up our space with our narrative change work. We know that in the summer we came together to start that conversation. You all were able to share what you wanted narrative change to look like, sound like, feel like. And we have a consultant, Fenton, who's going to be sharing more about what that work looks like at this point. So in our next slide, Melissa, thank you. the structure for this space, just to help folks with knowing what this first space is going to look like, we're going to have our first presenter with every hour counts, and they're going to be sharing federal level updates. After the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A, which Jackie and Rochelle are going to support with facilitating. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, go ahead and drop them in the chat. If you want to add your questions at the end of the presentation, you can drop them in the chat as well. Rochelle and Jackie are going to be looking for those questions so that when we get to that Q&A, we can raise themes that are coming up. In the second presentation, we're going to have partnership for children and youth, and this is going to be the state level updates. So we're going to have the same format. After that, we're going to have an opportunity for you all to engage with each other in breakout spaces. So get ready for that engagement piece. This is your cue to know you're going to unmute, hopefully turn on your camera and get to know some folks in the room and have discussions about the updates that you'll be hearing. And then we hope to get some report backs just so that everybody can get a sense of what was talked about in breakout rooms, what's coming up for folks. So that's going to be the structure for this first component of the space. So hopefully that helps everybody with knowing how we structured that. So in our next slide, our first presenter is going to be Jennifer Peck. So Jennifer Peck is a nationally recognized leader in the after-school youth development field who has played an instrumental role in advancing awareness, innovation, and investment in expanded learning programs across the country over the past 3 decades. Currently, Jennifer is a consultant advising local and national nonprofits on public policy, advocacy, and expanded learning system building efforts. Before launching her consulting work, Jennifer served as president and CEO of the Partnership for Children and Youth, which she founded and led for more than 2 decades, with a focus on building support and investment in expanded learning programs in California. Prior to joining the partnership, Jennifer was an appointee of President Bill Clinton at the U.S. Department of Education, where she supported implementation of high-priority initiatives, including the launch of the 21st Century Community Learning Center program. So welcoming Jennifer Peck to the stage and passing it over for our first space.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate having a little bit of time with you all today, and really appreciate ExpandLA for being there and bringing everybody together during what is just an incredibly scary, disturbing, overwhelming moment for us all around the country. And so, I'm gonna bring a little bit of context and a handful of updates that may not be a lot of news to you all, because I think most of you have been tracking pretty closely everything that's been happening out of Washington, D.C. over the last few weeks. But I hope to bring just a little bit of insight and guidance based on some of the conversations we've been having with colleagues in Washington, D.C. and around the country. And just a little bit of background that Every Hour Counts is a national network of expanded learning intermediaries like ExpandLA that are in blue states and red states and purple states and communities all around the country. And we're really trying to both share information, but also do a lot of listening to what folks are grappling with at the local level so that we can bring that back and feed that into the advocacy that we're doing at the national level. So that's one of the reasons I'm really appreciative to be with you today. I want to do a lot of listening throughout the time today. So you can go to the next slide. Can you back up one? Yeah. This is one that everybody knows, but I'm just going to spend a minute on context that what we saw in the election was this Republican trifecta at the national level that set us up for a lot of what we're seeing going on right now. with the Republicans holding barely a majority in the House of Representatives, of course, the White House, and, a relatively slim majority in the US Senate right now, which has set us up for a difficult situation over the next couple of years. Next slide. So a little bit on the environment in the 119th Congress right now. The president and the congressional Republicans really came in with what they saw as a mandate that was empowered by winning the Electoral College and the popular vote, which was not the case when President Trump was first elected. A lot of pressure coming in from the groups that supported him through this election, and the congressional Republicans also feeling pretty empowered by having maintained their majority, which was hanging in the balance for a little while, but they did maintain that majority for now. The Democrats have a lot less political leverage right now because of their position, and they're spending a lot of time really thinking about how to take advantage of opportunities in all that's unfolding right now to kind of build towards 2 years from now when congressional elections will happen again. And hopefully a lot of progress can be made, but it's a pretty difficult position for them at the moment. Having said all that, for passing any major legislation in this Congress, the majority party has very, very slim margins. And so I think legislatively and on big budget issues in the coming year, we're going to see a lot of probably stalling and inaction in the same way that we saw when Trump was president first. It was difficult for him to get things done legislatively. And I think we're going to see that happen again because of these slim majorities. Next slide. So these first 100 days are usually a key moment in any new administration. And some of the things that are happening in these first 100 days, they're having to finalize the appropriations for the federal fiscal year that we are in currently, that we're sort of in the middle of. The fiscal year 2025 funding for all federal programs goes through September 30th of 2025. And that has not yet been finalized by Congress. And that's kind of a continuing ongoing debate, while they're sort of placeholder funding the federal government. For next year's budget, the president will put forward his proposal for that later this winter. We don't know yet what that's going to look like, but I think we can make some pretty good assumptions that we're going to see a lot of proposed cuts to a lot of the programs that we care about, for children's programs, the social safety net, a wide variety of things that we're going to see proposed cuts for. But again, that will have to go through a process with Congress. On the agency actions, you've seen in the news all of these cabinet nominations moving through the process, which is taking up a lot of time and energy, and then staffing up all of the agencies with their own folks. And as we've also seen in a lot of cases, eliminating a lot of positions, which there's a lot of question about the legality of. And a lot of that action is already ending up in court, and much more of it will continue to. And then, of course, some of the most alarming stuff are these executive actions that we have seen over the last 2 weeks coming out of the White House, what they're calling this flood the zone strategy, where they're throwing all of these really alarming and destructive executive actions at us, in the US and around the world as well, that are kind of across the themes of culture wars, the stuff around DEI and gender identity, around the theme of government efficiency and trying to get rid of waste and abuse, which, a lot of it is really a myth, but they're really messaging around that. And then, of course, immigration. Next slide. So a little bit more on the executive actions. And while I'm going through this, I'm going to cut and paste something to put into the chat with a little bit more detail on what these executive actions mean. I don't want to take the time to go through every single one of them, but I'm just going to drop this in here. Sorry if that's not totally laid out correctly, but these are the executive orders that we've seen so far. The one on gender identity stating that there's only two sexes, male and female, established at birth. There is the directive around eliminating all of the programs, grants, and contracts that reference diversity, equity, and inclusion. The one on free speech and censorship that I think was largely directed at the efforts to try to monitor social media more carefully that have been pushed back on by some of the social media companies. I think it was directly related to that. The executive orders on immigration and the ICE actions that we're seeing. And then most recently, the executive action on dismantling the U.S. Department of Education, which I'll talk more about in a minute. He's also rescinded some executive orders that President Biden has put into place on advancing racial equity and combating gender discrimination. Oh, did you not get the message in the chat? Did that not come through? You know what? I think it might have exceeded. I think it exceeded the amount of space. I'll forward this for someone else to actually put in there in a way that the system will actually accept, because I think it was too long. So I'll make sure that gets out because it has a little bit more detail on each of these. Like I said, I didn't want to spend too much time going through the detail, but these are the big ones that we have been seeing that are causing a lot of fear and confusion. Next slide. As far as things that we may see in the coming budget year, as I mentioned before, we think we're going to see a big slash in spending in K-12 and social safety net programs. We will not know the details of this until the president's budget comes out. There's just a lot we don't know quite yet. They are proposing to abolish or significantly slim down the U.S. Department of Education. One thing to be very clear about is that the president cannot unilaterally get rid of a federal agency that was established by an act of Congress. I will also say that there have been numerous attempts to abolish the U.S. Department of Education over many years. When I worked at the U.S. Department of Education in the 1990s, Republicans tried to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education. This has happened over numerous Republican administrations, and it has never been successful, in part because there has just not been enough bipartisan support for this action. But it is something we want to keep an eye on. They can do some damage to the agency in the same way they can do damage to some of the other agencies that they've been attacking so far. We know that they're going to be assertively promoting school choice in the form of vouchers, taking money away from the public school system. And then one strategy we may see to take resources away from the U.S. Department of Education is to collapse big federal programs that a lot of our communities rely on, like Title I dollars that go to low-income students and other large programs, and just consolidating that into flexible money to send out to states, which comes with a lot of risks depending on where you sit. So these are some of the things that we do expect to see proposed. Next slide. So a few things on advocacy, which I know feels pretty difficult right now. I think many of us have really been struggling about, what to do, where to go with the overwhelm. And, going back to the beginning, this very much is the strategy of this administration, which is to overwhelm us. I think one of the really, really big reasons why convenings like this are incredibly important for us to share information with each other and figure out what we can do. I will say for the federal level, the local and state is going to be different, but for the federal level, this is going to be a lot of defense for the coming years. we're going to have to really focus on just trying to preserve what we've got now in programs that we all care about, whether it's the 21st Century Program for after school and summer, or Title I dollars for low-income kids, or childcare, foster care services through other agencies. We're going to have to do a lot of defending of what is in place. We also really have to make time for advocacy actions. And I know you're hearing this from ExpandLA, you're hearing this from a lot of different people, but I'm just going to emphasize it. Respond as often as you can to calls for action from the groups that you know and trust. And just in your work planning, carve out a few minutes of every day or every week to be doing this stuff, because it's going to be really, really important. And I would also say, looking ahead, I think some of the relationship building that can happen through the advocacy that we do now turns into really important relationships that we're going to need when we come out the other side of this moment of real chaos, which we will, but it's going to take some time. And I want to just give a couple of examples of why this advocacy matters so much. And I'm going to give a couple of examples from the federal level that I think are pretty powerful. When Trump was first president, he proposed to totally eliminate the federal 21st Century Community Learning Centers program, which is, the one major funding source at the federal level for after school and summer programs. There was such an outcry around the country that program, by the end of his term, ended up getting an increase. It was higher than before he came into office, which was an amazing turnaround that was really due to folks around the country making those phone calls and sending those emails and signing the petitions. It was so loud that it completely turned it around. And so that's one thing to really keep in mind, that we can make a difference in this in really, really concrete ways. I'm also going to use another example that is much more recent. You probably heard the news about the total federal funding freeze that the president tried to implement that would have basically shut off the faucet for a lot of dollars that are coming into your communities for a wide variety of things on the education, healthcare, childcare, you name it. There was immediately an outcry in red and blue places because these programs touch everybody. They touch every community. There was a lawsuit filed, and there was a challenge in the court, and it was immediately rescinded. I think there's going to be some ongoing questions about whether they might try to come back and do that another way. But the outcry and the response is really mattering right now. So those are a couple things I just wanted to reference. This is going to be exhausting. It already has been, but we have to really just stay the course. And, I think the final thing I'll say on that is, where you are in the greater LA area, you have an enormous amount of advantage here because you are such a densely populated region of the country. You have a huge number of members of Congress who represent you. And I think getting to every single one of them and, partnering with ExpandLA to do that is going to be incredibly important during this time. So I will stop there. I know we're going to do a little bit of Q&A, but, I just want to repeat one thing I said earlier. Number one, I'm not an expert in all of these federal issues, so I'll answer questions I have, and ones that I don't have answers to, I'll get back to you. And I'm also really interested in taking some notes on concerns and questions that you have that I need to bring back and just do a little research on and feed into what we're working on at the national level.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your expertise and insights. I just want to remind folks, if you have any questions for Jennifer, to please put them in the chat. Jackie and I will help to field those questions. I'm currently not
That's,
seeing any. Do
I
you?
have one so
Okay,
far.
perfect.
It's sort of someone is asking if you can share examples of how to advocate, such as like posting on social media, calling representatives, maybe a little more concrete ideas they can take away.
Yeah, I mean, so calling your members of Congress, if you have time to do that, that's a great thing to do. And you can do it in two different ways. You can either call their local district office, or you can call the Capitol switchboard in Washington, D.C. And I'll put the phone number in here. You probably, a lot of you have been seeing this on social media. Um, but and I actually always recommend if you have time doing both. Um, One thing I would also suggest, and again, I to the extent possible doing this in coordination with ExpandLA, but many of your organizations, probably have local either council members or school board members or other local officials that you communicate with in a variety of ways. Maybe you've invited them to a site visit, maybe they're on your mailing list. I strongly suggest figuring out who represents you at the federal level and treating those folks exactly the same way. Find out who the local staff members are, get them on your mailing list, invite them to your events. In addition to calling them to express your opinion on something, you want to start bringing those folks into the ether and educating them a little bit about what you do and starting some of that relationship building. Really, really, really important. I think the phone calls that you make and the emails that you send are going to have a lot more power if you're also doing a little bit of relationship building and educating them about the work that you do in the community. So if you haven't done that yet, definitely do. And one thing I have found really interesting, in working with some really strong out of school time organizations all around the country that, are very, very sophisticated in the local advocacy work they do or the state advocacy work they do, typically don't extend that to their federal representatives because it feels so distant. But we should be treating them, especially now, exactly the same way. And the local staff are usually really excited to learn about who you are and establish that contact. And then, yes, also, tracking sources that you trust in social media. Um, and, folks are paying a lot of attention to that as well.
Thank you, Jennifer. And certainly ExpandLA can play a role in supporting each one of you when it comes to identifying your local elected leaders. And we can certainly talk about more strategies on how to connect with those local elected leaders. So if any of you are interested in receiving some of that assistance and support, please reach out to either me or Jenny. I see another question here from Carla para los niños. Will the current landscape impact the earmarked funding?
Yes. So for anybody who was expecting to get earmarks through the fiscal year 2025 budget, which is the one that should have been settled by now, but is currently operating at this point through March. We don't know yet whether those earmarks are actually going to happen or not. I think the current guess is probably not, but they're not dead yet. So if you're in a situation where you're a member of Congress, whether you worked through, a congressperson or your U.S. senator, and we're expecting an earmark through FY 2025, just stay in close touch with that office to get updates. Like I said, they're not dead, but it's not looking promising. As for next fiscal year 2026, typically the application process for these earmarks opens up, in the late winter. We are hearing that the House of Representatives may be open to continuing the earmark process. Not likely on the Senate side, but it may be opening up on the House side. So, in your communications with your members of Congress, again, stay in touch about that. But that's what we're hearing on earmarks.
Jennifer, would you mind maybe providing a bit more context about earmarked funds for folks that may not be aware or familiar with that?
Yeah, sure. So the earmarks are basically flexible money that you can request from your particular member of Congress for a local project that is clearly a one-time expenditure that has clear benefit for the residents of that particular congressional district. So sometimes, it might be a nonprofit wanting to build a new building or improve their building that serves the community, and they can request one-time funds through their member of Congress to be able to do that project. It doesn't have to be capital projects. Sometimes it's technology upgrades. Sometimes it's developing curriculum for something. It has to just squarely be a one-time cost. And basically, the history of this funding is that each member of Congress, your congresspeople and your senators each get a pot of money that they can spend on projects in their own districts. And then they have to decide through an application process, how to distribute that. It requires a lot of advocacy and relationship building with these offices to be considered through those dollars. The application processes themselves tend to be relatively simple. And then it's heavy, heavy, heavy advocacy to try to convince that office that, you have the wherewithal to be able to manage federal funds, and that office is going to get plenty of credit for having given you that money. So it can be a fair amount of work, but it can really pay off because they tend to be generous amounts of money. So if anybody wants more information on the process, happy to, talk with folks at another time about that. We have at Every Hour Counts some tools and information on the application process that we're happy to share with anybody who's interested in learning more.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, but we're going to take all the questions that are in the chat, and we're going to be sending out a Q&A response with all the recording and the slides and a lot of people have been asking. So for the last question for you at the moment, I'll take the one. Are there efforts to centralize, my chat just moved, efforts across the country around advocacy? Including the economic impact of funding cuts, sorry.
Yeah, there's a lot. Kind of depending on which sector you're in, and it's really hard to track everything that's going on right now. There's a national out-of-school time coalition that I know, Kim, your folks from Boys and Girls Club, are very much at in fact, they host it, that are working on some messaging. And I think what's challenging about this at a national level is the messaging is different and needs to be different depending on where you sit in the country. And this is where just, the political environment that you sit in is going to have a lot of impact on how folks can respond to the threats out there. For example, and I meant to mention this earlier, because, I think there's a huge amount of confusion and fear about this, right now, especially, obviously on the immigration stuff, but I wanted to mention on the diversity and equity and inclusion executive order that the president put out that affects all federal grants and contracts. We've received a lot of questions about whether folks should just, be proactively eliminating that language from what they do and curbing back, equity programs in anticipation of a crackdown on that. And the advice that we're getting and that we're relaying to folks that we're talking around the country is, number one, don't rush to change anything that you're doing now unless you are explicitly told to by a contracting entity that receives federal money. So, for example, every school district in America receives federal money of some kind, and each of them is figuring out how to comply with this order. I think some school districts in certain parts of the country are just going to comply with it, wholesale and communicate that to all of their subcontractors what they need to do. There's other places in more progressive parts of the country that are going to resist that or figure out something in between. So what I would say to folks is don't rush to change anything that you're doing unless you are explicitly requested to, but also be paying attention and anticipate what might be coming down the road, depending on, what is the nature of the school board that you sit in. I think local governing bodies are each going to be interpreting this a little bit different. So, know where all of your funding comes from and whether any federal money touches the work that you do, and be watching and listening for updates on this. But for now, stay the course and stick to your values and keep what you've got in place.
Jenny, I think there's so many Jennifer, Jenny, and our
Yeah,
next presenter is
sorry.
also
We have a
Jennifer.
Jen
I
as
got
well.
I got a
Fun,
little
fun.
Zoom notice, so it kind of froze me. But thank you so much, Jennifer Peck, for that really, really great information. We know we had really great questions in the chat, like Jackie mentioned. We're going to be creating a Q&A form, and we're going to be working with our presenters so that we can make sure we get answers to all these really great questions and then send them out to everybody so that everyone has access to them. So if you are just coming up with questions, continue to put them in the chat. And then that way they will get answered either in discussion or in that Q&A that we'll be creating. If I can get the PowerPoint slide for our next presenter, and feel free to drop some love in the chat for our presenters. Thank you for taking your time, for being here. For our second presenter, Jennifer Dietrich, will be sharing our state level political and legislative updates. As the Director of Policy at the Partnership for Children and Youth, Jen leads the California After School Alliance Advocacy Alliance, or some folks might know it as CA3, a coalition of more than 40 community-based and school district providers and advocacy organizations across California, advocating for increased access to and improved quality of expanded learning programs. Jen joined PCY in 2012 with 5 years of state and federal legislative experience. In Washington, D.C., she served 2 members of Congress from California, and in Sacramento, Jen advised 2 chairs of the Assembly Budget Committees on education finance during the Great Recession. Jen earned an MA in political management from George Washington University and a BA in political science from the University of Washington. She was a 2018-19 White Riley Peterson After School and Expanded Learning Policy Fellow. So if I could get some love in the chat, welcome Jennifer, or Jen, as we know her, to our space. And thank you so much for taking time to share some updates with us.
Yes. Thank you for the invitation and for bearing with all the versions of Jennifer in this coordination today. Yeah, and I had a great introduction. Thank you so much about PCY and CA3. So I can just hop straight into the information. And I think Jennifer Peck really gave us kind of a great foundation at the federal level. And now I can move to sharing the state landscape, what conversations may be most important for you all to know, for those who are serving students and families. And we can also share a bit about how federal action or threats and also emergencies are trickling down and impacting state decision making right now. And then at the end, I'll give you a few ideas on how you could elevate voices from your community, your students, your staff, and so on. So great. Thanks so much for putting this slide up. Just want to give a quick reminder on the impact of the November election at the state level. At the state level, Democrats easily maintained control of the state capitol. We saw a lot of conversation and success around efforts to increase public safety and to talk more about economic affordability for families. One of the biggest things we're also trying to deal with is a huge turnover in the legislature. So for assembly members and state senators at the state level, nearly 25% of the body is brand new. And so there are many, many legislators who are excited to meet with their constituents, to hear from you, to regularly connect with you, but they need education about what you do, the impact you have. So just to put that in mind as how we're entering this legislative session. 2025 kicks off the next 2-year session, we call it, legislative session. And so bills can be introduced until February 21st. And they have just under 2 years to kind of make it across the finish line, or they die and they'll have to start over if they want to. So we are already starting to look at some of the bills that have already been introduced, but there's more to come. And so there will be opportunities for y'all to learn more about legislation that is moving this year. And finally, just want to flag that this is the final 2-year session for Governor Newsom. We all imagine he has higher aspirations, and he definitely wants to secure his legacy in prioritizing kids and families, and for California to continue to lead the way for the country in a number of areas. So just want to share that background and influences as we make these state decisions. So we can go forward to talk about the state budget. So much of what Governor Newsom has done and the state has done in the last few years gets done through the annual budget process. It's not the type of thing where they introduce a bill on each different proposal as much as they can kind of cram into the budget. They are doing right now. And folks have said for a long time that the state budget represents our values and priorities as a state. So this is kind of the best opportunity to look at state level action right now. This is the timeline. The governor released his budget summary January 10th. Just this last weekend, we got trailer bill language, meaning that these are hundreds of pages of language trying to implement, how would we send that money out? What policies would we change? So all of that is coming out, and there's more trailer bill language that will be released, but we're starting to come through it. The most important date I want y'all to look at is in May. So mid-May, we get updated revenue forecasts. The governor's office goes through their budget proposal again and makes updates. It could change policy or funding amounts. It could be brand new proposals entered in this updated document. So this is really we're kind of having conversations about what may be, but we really won't know what our final options are until May. And so really want you all to be aware that, once we hear what's in the updated proposal mid-May, we are going to have less than a month before the legislature has to pass a final budget bill. So that's why it's really important for you all to stay engaged and know what's going on when it comes to May. And then the governor has the end of June to pass the budget. And also just to say, in the past, last year, the governor signed, I think, 30 different budget bills. So while this process is moving, there are multiple times when there are earlier budgets, follow-up budgets. We already see some budget being passed to send more money down to LA to help support immigration threats with Department of Justice. So just to let you know, this is a big issue, but it also comes up at different times of the year. Going to the next slide, the last two things I just want you to know before we get into the specifics of the governor's proposal this year is that, everything that was put out in the budget summary in January 10th, that's great, but it may shift. Folks got letters that, obviously, given everything with the devastating fires and everything in motion right now, proposals may not be able to go through as they currently are. So everyone's just kind of on notice and we're waiting to see what may happen. The other thing that's important to know, if you work with schools and get access to some of the education funding, is that most of the fire recovery funding will not impact education funding because they're separate parts of the budget. So you have kind of the general fund, and then you have what we call Proposition 98, which guarantees a certain amount of funding for schools. So just to let you know that as people are talking about tough decisions, budget deficits, it's mostly on the general fund side. Going on to the next slide, we can get into the specifics now. So overall in education, revenues came in better than we expected. And so they were able, they're not predicting cuts in education. They're even anticipating a COLA, a cost of living adjustment for schools, about 2.4%. And on top of that, 1.8 billion in discretionary funds. And it's called the Student Support and Discretionary Block Grant. We're definitely interested on the types of programs that could fall under that. This also can be seen as flexible funding for school districts. So while we can talk about, investments in some of these supports, they also have alternatives for how they can use this funding if it goes through. If we move on to expanded learning, in the next slide, ELOP, Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, to start in code, it says that school, LEAs are encouraged to work with community partners to run ELOP. The governor is keeping his commitment, ongoing funding, $4 billion a year for ELOP. And in the budget proposal this year, he proposes an additional $435 million. And his messaging would say that, if funding goes through at 4.4 billion, that ELOP is fully funded and checked off the list. We have conversations about all the different steps that we need to get through to get to universal access to expanded learning opportunities. But just to let you know the conversation. And basically this additional money would be used to give more funding to high need districts. So with ELOP, there's a tier 1 rate and there's a tier 2 rate. It can be almost over $1,000 difference between the rates. And so with this budget proposal, the governor saying, hey, if your school district has 55% or more unduplicated pupils percentage, UPP. Oh, I'm glad it's spelled out on the screen. Okay, so yeah, so you can tell how they calculate that. And so so if you have 55% or more, you would get that tier 1 rate. Currently, it's only 75% or more UPP school districts get that upper rate. So when we do some of the ugly math on the background, it could, provide at least 300 school districts, considerably more amount of funding to operate ELOP. It would also require them to provide access to the entire school. So not just trying to prioritize spots for unduplicated pupils, but to provide pretty much universal access. And all this to say, with ELOP, very much it prioritizes elementary students, TK through 6, and if there's funding left over, then it can go to middle and high school students. So just want to give you a quick background on when we're talking ELOP. In broad strokes, other education and non-education issues you may want to know about. If you go to the next slide, there's new investment in the educator workforce. One thing we were really excited to see is something about credit for prior learning. I think we've talked a lot in expanded learning about the skills and competencies that should be considered when they're, when working in expanded learning programs and how they can transfer to future careers. So that's, some of these different opportunities. Literacy and math coaches. Yeah, you can get the slides and you can also follow up with me if you want, directions to the actual language for any of these. Going to the next slide, another pot of money that folks might be interested in learning about is about youth behavioral health. So, this is very new to me, but wanted to flag that, $8 billion in state, local, and federal funding, really trying to focus on community-based organized networks of support, and even calls out a focus on children and youth. So very interested on what that could look like. And Prop 64, so the tax on cannabis, there's money available this year in the budget that will specifically need to be used for education prevention, school retention. So again, another thing to keep an eye on, and we can get more information on. Going to the last couple slides, just want to talk about emergency response with the fires. Executive orders are coming out. There was already a special budget session. Yeah, I think just this week he announced 2.5 billion has gone out to start helping with recovery. And so, you can click on, we have like a list of different executive orders, but I just flagged, this one and the budget bills specifically about LA fire. So we can dig into that more. And then, of course, we're tracking how if the governor issues any executive orders or other things to help fend off the immigration threats at schools, childcare centers, and so on. The last slide, just want to flag for y'all, is just what are your opportunities and when to engage. So on the next slide, we have different activities at the local, state, and federal level. Well, sorry, not federal level. Number one, though, we'll go right to left. Most importantly is, yes, relationship building. Understanding that there's going to be a lot coming up and we're going to have to move quickly, and it's going to be so important for you to get your messages and to share potential impact with those decision makers, really working on this relationship long term, not just one time when we need something. Also at the local level, you can make recommendations for how, if there's any ELOP funding that is unspent, we'll get some new data hopefully this month about what opportunities could be to advocate at the local level for that. We also know that there are a number of initiatives locally that they want to bring in community engagement. They want to hear from students and families. And so you can help be a bridge to connect them to the people on the ground who it's supposed to serve. So that is another opportunity you could do at the local level. Just thinking about what's coming up and also working with folks to identify where are their policy challenges at the local or the state level. Where are we running into barriers when it comes to so much this year? And then lastly, at the state level, of course, we will, CA3 will be tracking the budget and bills and creating recommendations and letters of support, all that good stuff. If you're interested, in March, March 3rd and 4th, we have our annual advocacy day in Sacramento. Is another way of people just having that in-person experience to build that relationship and share their personal story, which is the most impactful for legislators to hear. And just, want to help keep you all updated of what's coming from the state. And so very excited to follow up with ExpandLA and with CA3, we can give you some more information. Thank you, Kim, for dropping the link to CA3 Coalition. And thank you also for the last slide. QR code if you want more information on our coalition, but also about some of the bills and policy proposals that I mentioned. So I can stop now and help with any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Jen. If anybody has questions for Jen, you could put in the chat. The only one I see so far is a question around, is there a website that you can look up like the tier 1, tier 2 schools? Is it on
No.
CD?
This is like our top goal to search down. So we know of some people who've kind of done the math on their own, going district by district. We are working, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we can find a list that will categorize tier 1 and tier 2. And so we can see that percentage of UPP. So we can really say these districts would move and this is how much more they could possibly get. So that is something we are very interested in analyzing and sharing with you all. So you will know if your school district is one of the ones on the tipping edge and could be getting so much more money.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Jen. And just to share with you all a lot of our advocacy work we are doing along with and in partnership with Every Hour Counts and CA3, PCY. We are in regular contact and communication, just making certain that our work aligns, and we can, of course, provide more updates on what we plan to do. And in fact, later on in the meeting, Jenny's going to share a few opportunities for you all to get involved in our advocacy work as a sector in LA.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I think our Jenny, thank you, Jen. Our Jenny will explain the process for the breakout rooms, and then we will get a chance to chat in the breakout rooms.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen, for making time to share those updates with us. Really, really helpful information. And Mauricio, if we go to the next slide. We wanted to make sure to, like we always do when we get together, is make space for you all to dialogue, and have an opportunity to connect. So we are going to be going into breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask a couple things, like one, if we can have, when you are in breakout rooms, identify a note taker so that someone can take notes as folks are having conversation, a timekeeper. We're going to be making announcements in the broadcast feature to make sure that folks are keeping with time. We're going to have about 20 minutes for the space. And then identify someone who's gonna share back. We're just looking for like nuggets. What are some things that the group got really excited about? And these are some of the guiding questions. So we're providing a pulse check. How have recent state and federal legislative and policy changes or actions created challenges and opportunities for your community or organization? And then you can kind of choose your own adventure. We give you 2 follow-up questions. What is your organization doing at the moment in response to the political climate? Or given the threats to federal funding, what immediate actions can organizations take to engage with policymakers at the federal and/or state level? How can we mobilize our network to support legislative efforts? So in the chat, I'm going to be sharing the, sorry, the link to our note taking. And I just want to make sure everyone has access. Thank you, Suri, for also putting the document in the chat. If I could get folks to click on the link and just give me a thumbs up for like non-ExpandLA folks. Give me a thumbs up to just to make sure folks have access to the document and you're able to edit, not just view. And thank you so much, Sacha, for the love in the chat. Definitely shout out our presenters. Javier, thank you so much for the thumbs up. I'll take that as a cue that folks have access to the document. Appreciate it, Javier, looking out. So we're gonna be opening up the breakout rooms, and each of you will have a breakout room number. Make sure in the Excel document to look for the number that coincides with your breakout room. So Anna, if we can open up our breakout rooms, that would be wonderful. And don't forget to introduce yourselves.
Jenny, where do we find the breakout rooms? I was waiting on it to pop up, but it hasn't. Or are you still doing it? I'm sorry.
No, I believe, Anna, are you good with opening the breakout rooms? We want about 5 to 6 folks per room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to close them. Something
Oh,
happened.
Oh,
but technical difficulties.
no problem. I just didn't want y'all to think I'm asleep on the camera. I'm here.
So we need to wait until they allow us to go into a room? I'm sorry, good morning.
Yeah, give it like a couple seconds. It should show up. Sorry about that.
Sure, thank you.
Meanwhile, we wait for that. You all can reminisce on the questions and start thinking of what you can possibly share with your breakout room folks.
Oh, is there an update? Oh, okay, we're going back. Okay. And someone's sending the questions to us in the chat? Yeah.
Yes, the questions are in the document. And then meanwhile, we're waiting for the breakout rooms to open.
We think they're open. Is anybody finding the way to join a room?
I'm not.
I don't
It's
see
not
where
appearing as an option. Oh yeah, now it is. At least I have it on my screen.
Happening for our people that were pre-assigned, but not for everybody else.
So if you click more, then there is an option where you can see the breakout rooms.
We're just choosing our own. We weren't assigned.
No, you have to choose one. So let me choose one. Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Yes. So everybody click on more and then breakout rooms, and it'll let you choose a room. We want about 5 people per room if possible, so that everybody has a chance to speak and get their thoughts out.
And then for the folks who are still in the room, not sure if you have the option of going into a breakout room.
We need to go to another room. It was just me, Jennifer, and Diana. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
So can someone put us in another room? Oh, and I see other people are still in here.
Yeah, you can go to room 11. I believe you can choose join room in your
Oh,
break room.
okay. All of us? Oh, okay. I guess join a room that has fewer people.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Mhm. And then I know we have a couple I was trying to see unassigned, but I don't see the folks that are here on unassigned. So I'm not sure if that's a technical piece. Armando, I'm not sure if you got like a notice to be able to join a room. I can't assign anyone else. Anna, I just see you as an assigned. I don't know if you see on your end any other unassigned folks in the breakout room option.
No, everyone's been assigned. I guess maybe haven't been able to join.
Got it.
At least on my end, it says not joined.
Oh, got it, got it, got it. Cool. I'm gonna join one of the rooms that has less folks. And then actually before I go, I have to give you like a time to broadcast. Let me look at where I'm at with time. We have to start Fenton 11:25. 11:23. Sharebacks. Eleven ten. So if you can close rooms at 11 and then give people a 5-minute heads up at 10:55, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Sorry, I
Okay.
had to like move numbers around.
You're okay. Sounds good.
Sorry, I accidentally hit leave the breakout room. Can I join the breakout room again or not? No.
They're gonna be closing shortly.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we can continue. Once Jenny hops on, we'll continue the conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
All right, welcome back to the room. I think let me know when everybody's back. Do we know how many rooms we had altogether?
We're back.
Yeah, how many rooms did we have altogether? So I managed the share out.
We have like 10 minutes for the share out.
How many
So
rooms? Yeah, how many groups? Yeah, so I know we were in some great conversation. I'm just gonna jump right in to see how many groups can get a chance to share back. But if you have like one key takeaway from your group, and then as more groups chime in, just something that hasn't been mentioned already, if you want to add. So maybe we'll go in order. I don't know which group one was disbanded, I think. Group two, maybe? Was there a
If I
group?
could, if I could share, I gotta jump off.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I really just want to thank you guys for hosting this. Again, my name is Josiah Bruni. I'm CEO and founder of Music Changing Lives. And this was like so great. I just thank you for this time and sharing space with us. And I love you all for what you're doing in the universe. And I just look forward to connecting with you guys again and meeting you in person one day. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. I wasn't planning to cry yet. Next, I don't know if you were group two or next group, if you could top that. Group three?
I was a part of group 3. I don't know where our facilitator is. I guess she just took on the role. But yeah, so just a summary of what we came to the conclusion of. Just honestly that there's multiple fears out there with participants that work with our organizations, fears that have existed with all of the choice words that, or very scary taglines and subject lines that we've been seeing in emails and on social media, and that they are coming together and creating a way to combat those things either through mentorship programs, by making students feel safe, free sports clinics for people that can't afford sports programs. There's also been some drop-off pickup locations for victims of the Eaton fire. So I do see that the organizations within my group have really come together to kind of be that safe space for anybody that has had any issues and any fears with anything that has been brought forth.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Group three.
That was pre-check.
That was group
Oh,
three.
sorry. Four.
I'm in group
I used
4.
to be good
Hi.
at math.
Hi, everyone from group 4. Agree, really seeing themes of lower attendance at programs, possibly due to threats around immigration. And the flip side of that coin, these organizations and the group being a beacon of good information about school as a safe space, about training if ICE were to come to campus, finding those vetted and provided materials and being able to share those out, and looking for opportunities to advocate when possible. And then I guess another, in terms of like actions, engaging with policymakers, folks in our group called out, paying attention to CA3 and ExpandLA, looking for those calls to action, especially when we are finding it hard to get our footing, and to look where those actions are, to kind of keep our eye on what's coming through the intermediary groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next group, 5, I believe. I'm still counting, right? Anybody here from group 5?
I'm with group 5.
Go for it.
Um, we tapped on a lot of just having to do with the processes and like fears that are associated with a lot of funding, and then how this impacts the schools. A lot of I guess the key point or the touching points were just the overall arching like fear, but the aspects of the process that would actually take to remove things like Title I funding from the schools, or like the impacts that it will have with that. I think that that made people feel a little bit more comfortable. Jennifer kind of touched on that inside of our group. It's just understanding that things is not it's not going to just be a snap of a finger, and that a lot of even the red states and a lot of the red places um, also have a significant need for some of the same stuff that we do, which will work in our favor overall.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Next, group 6. Anybody? 6? Or I'll go to 7 until 6 appears. Anybody from 7?
I can share out if nobody from my group wants to. I'm from DIY Girls, and in my group we had representatives from Koreatown Youth and Community Center, After School All Stars, Helpline, Youth Counseling, and Latino Equality Alliance. So we talked about, the climate around immigration right now. And I know within my organization, DIY Girls, we work in a predominantly immigrant community. So we're just having conversations internally about what we can do to best support our students, both from like a pragmatic standpoint and like a social, emotional, cultural standpoint. Some of our programs have already commenced, but once even more of our programs commence. And then we talked a lot about like maintaining relationships with donors during these really tumultuous times. A lot of fear around what it means to be receiving services right now, kind of recalling the early stages of the pandemic that we're in, feeling very similar in terms of the culture around receiving support. And a lot of the same themes coming up here. So fear over deportation efforts, students out at protests. But some things that our organizations are doing in this moment in response to the political climate are a lot of Know Your Rights workshops, different support circles to share resources, and step-by-step plans for preparedness. One representative from our group did share that the LA County Department of Mental Health had something that they sent out. And we talked a little bit about the after school and summer challenge in Sacramento and what that might look like.
Great, thank you. And I think there's group 6 and group 8 still left to go. Anybody want to go?
I can share for group 8. So for in terms of like how folks have been impacted by the political climate, we spoke about, of course, the federal funding freeze and fears of key programs and work being cut off, including Head Start programs. We also spoke about some of the kids and families we work with. There's a lot of fear in the air right now, and folks might be afraid to access public benefits or to speak out because of they're worried about retaliation. So those are some of the big challenges that we're confronting, and we were thinking about what could we do to in response. And some of the ideas that came up were empower community members with organizing and advocacy skills and civic education, speaking out, via social media and making public statements to ensure that folks served by our organizations feel safe. We talked about, know your rights trainings and public charge trainings being helpful, potentially. We also spoke about the importance of engaging policymakers in whatever way we can, whether that's phone banking, providing public comment, emailing legislators, engaging them on their social media channels, And someone shared this, comment that I thought was really helpful. We can't afford to be divided in silos. Right now, sometimes as nonprofits or community orgs, we're all competing, right, for the same pot of funding, and we really need to stand together right now and be united and build community power. So that's a little bit from Group 8.
Great, thank you. And I know we did sort of allude to that in the group I was in as well, as far as like working together, sharing resources, reaching out to each other. So that's something we can do on our end. And when we send the follow-up, of course, we'll take any feedback in the survey as to how maybe some of those efforts you think could be supported, but that's something we want to make sure we're connecting people and working with people to support these efforts. Thank you. And I think there is a group 9 as well, group 9 and still maybe group 6 if they're still, or did I forget anybody else? Whoever didn't go yet. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm with group 9. So one of the great things we talked about organizations knowing each other, knowing who's out there so that we can share services, share resources. Another thing we talked about were different things. We spent a good bit of time on different things we were doing in light of the political climate, which was really great because we were able to share tips. We talked about language that has to be changed, or that we're at least our organization that we're changing, just to make sure that we're covered in case things happen. We talked about one of the organizations talked about how they were putting up signs and that attribute specifically to ensuring that they are not that if someone comes, if ICE comes, then then they know their rights and they know what can and cannot be done. And so, and languaging those signs correctly, and sharing services and things like that. That's basically what we talked about.
Great, thank you. I think, is that all the groups?
I can jump in just to highlight. And then for group 6, if you all want to jump in, if there's anything you want to share, definitely jump in. I know something that definitely resonated with me that was shared was someone said locking in on self-care and mental health in order for us to be our best selves when we're showing up for students and community. And I think that sometimes we're people that are very selfless and are always thinking of others. So it's really important for us to make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves and taking care of our staff so that we're our best selves when we're showing up for students. And then there was layers of advocacy on when it comes to making sure that although we're in California, we're very fortunate to a certain degree. There are still parts of California that are considered red, that are where there was a conversation where someone shared. It's also important to reach out to those parts of California to make sure that we're reaching across the aisle, kind of that concept and finding commonalities, so that we can find ways to bridge gaps and compromise for the sake of our students, communities, and families. Along with that was a concept of doubling down on what's happening in your local area and really understanding who are those key stakeholders, who are those legislators, what are they doing, what are they saying, how are they acting, what are they voting on, and making sure that you're in tune and communicating with those folks so that whatever is important to your community, the community that you serve, is also represented. So those were all really, really great takeaways. So thanks, group 6.
Right. Thank you, everybody. I think that was all the groups. I'm glad everyone had time there to connect. The few of the takeaways that for ExpandLA is continue to connect the network, organizations to each other in different sort of coalitions and convenings. So we're going to be supporting the advocacy efforts And we also have our communications forum here, but I know our group had talked about that as far as the messaging. I know that's super important. So that's another piece that ExpandLA is definitely going to be supporting in. So thank you all for the conversations. I'm going to pass it back to Jenny and Saray to take us away for the next piece.
Wonderful. So, Melissa, we can thank you. Have the slide. So we're going to step into a really quick 5 minute just to close out this first step, this first space before moving into our narrative change work. To share, like Jackie mentioned, and there have been places during our time together where we've kind of talked about like what's next, what is some of the action that we're taking. So we're going to have this small little brief space where we're going to provide updates on our advocacy efforts and next steps. So we'll start it off with Saray.
Hello, everyone. My name is Saray Addison, and I am the Partnerships and Community Engagement Manager at ExpandLA. I just want to say that we genuinely appreciate you taking the time to be here, and thank you all so much for sticking around. Today, or within the next few days, we will be sending out the Defending Our Funding survey. This is going to be a tool to help us better understand how the potential shifts that we've been talking about in the federal funding could impact your organizations. I just want to reiterate that your input within this survey is going to be really crucial in helping us be able to advocate for meaningful solutions as we continue to move forward together. One of the reasons why this, or a few reasons why this survey matters is because we really want to know, we know that the funding changes are going to have ripple effects across our expanded learning community. And so this survey is really going to help us understand how those shifts in federal funding might impact your work. We're going to be able to identify potential gaps in funding for your staff, services, programming, and just overall financial stability of your organizations. We'll be able to gather real-time data also from your organizations and organizations just across LA County that are in our network. We talked about we mentioned that this is not a time for us to be in silos. And so thinking about how we can come together to advocate for the supports and resources that we'll need to continue serving our communities. So this collective voice is really going to support during these funding changes. I want to also let you all know that once you receive the survey, there will be some questions around like your federal funding, annual budgets, the programming that you all have, as well as how the potential funding cuts will impact you all. So just want to reiterate that you will have privacy within this space. The idea is to keep your responses confidential. The input is going to be aggregated and anonymized to protect your sensitive information. Again, this is really just to gather as much data as possible in order to strengthen our advocacy efforts. So no one organization will be singled out in this. So just as next steps, we'll be sending out a follow-up email after this meeting with a link to the survey. So please, please, please take a few minutes to complete it. Again, your input will be able to directly inform our advocacy efforts and ultimately be able to help sustain our expanding learning community. So thank you all again so much for being here, as well as for what you all do to support our youth. And I'm really excited about and encouraged really about how we're going to be able to come together to support the organizations across our network. Thank you. Jenny?
Yes, wonderful. And I know in the chat, just to make sure for folks who might be hearing this recording, ideally we would like one submission per organization because we're taking that assessment of funding source approach. So if you could have one person lead in making the submission, that would be wonderful. In the next slide, I'm going to be sharing, we heard a lot of different updates, which means there's a lot of room for advocacy. So we're going to be launching ExpandLA Advocacy Alliance name, will be finalized with the group that becomes part of this coalition. But this new alliance will be our way of really coordinating and organizing efforts that are currently impacting and will continue to impact our expanded learning sector, communities, and family members. So we will be sending more information about this group to folks, but really like what we want to focus in is addressing gaps in the field, ensuring equitable access to funding, and igniting widespread support for expanded learning. So we hope that you take into consideration, maybe think with your team who might be the best person to be a part of this alliance. And we're going to be partnering with PCY and Every Hour Counts and other intermediaries across the state to continue to guide our work. But it's going to be a really great group of folks that is going to take that leadership role when it comes to advocacy within our network. What we know is we have really amazing leaders in the network. So it's just like, how do we now coordinate efforts that are intentional, that are strategic, that are thought out, that will bring us together and really show the power that we have, especially in the county that we have. LA is very powerful. It has a lot of money. It has a lot of influence in all kinds of levels. So how do we show our collective action as, as a network that has an important voice, not only in our county and state, but really in the country. So really excited to launch this, and we'll share more information in the follow-up email that we send. Along with that is our Immigration Rights Summit. I'd be surprised if immigration didn't come up in breakout rooms conversations. I know it came up in the breakout room conversation that I was in. We're going to be having another space that's going to be addressing this really urgent need right now for our communities and our organizations and our staff. So we're going to be sending out a RSVP for this Immigration Rights Summit. The purpose of the summit is going to be to equip our expanded learning partners and our staff with the information that we need that's most relevant. We know that right now there's already been a lot of Know Your Rights workshops, so that's why we're pushing it off to the end of the month just to make sure we're getting even more updates on current legislation, policies, strategies, approaches, and we're partnering with different folks across the county and potentially even across the state. So definitely look forward to that space that we're going to be hosting February 28th from 10 to 12 is the estimated time as of now. But we'll also be sending further information as we continue to finalize that space. Can you also share data about enforcement to date? Yes, thank you so much for that suggestion. We will add that to our conversations with folks that we're consulting with. With that, I'm gonna pass it over to Rochelle, who's going to be introducing our last space, which is on our narrative change work.
Yes, I have the pleasure of introducing the final section of our agenda today, which is a presentation from Fenton on our narrative change campaign. At our countywide network meeting in July this past year, many of you participated and attended. We had an opportunity to have roundtable discussions about the different perceptions or views of expanded learning, depending on whether you're a young person or an elected official, a funder, a school district. We talked about the importance of highlighting the critical role of expanded learning in youth development and how changing the narrative would support our advocacy efforts. Narrative change, as many of you know, is a crucial part of advocacy because it shapes public perception, it influences policy decisions, and it also shifts cultural attitudes. Narrative change helps to build public will, mobilize support, and also drive systemic change. At that same meeting, we introduced that ExpandLA was planning to launch a narrative change campaign and hire a communications firm to lead the work. We chose to partner with Fenton. Fenton is a leading social impact communications agency dedicated to driving meaningful change through strategic storytelling and advocacy. As a key partner in this campaign, Fenton is helping to develop the strategy to reshape public perception and to elevate the vital role of expanded learning in fostering youth success. Fenton is working with us and also our partner organizations, all of you, to ensure that both local and state government officials recognize and invest in the sector as an essential force for social impact. So now I'd like to introduce Paul Hernandez. Paul, are you in the house? Chief Strategy Officer at Fenton, and he's going to go ahead and introduce his team and share more about the Fenton team and what they've been up to over the past few months and what they will be planning for in the coming months. Or is it Julio? Which of you are taking over the mic?
Hi, everyone. Actually, it'll be my colleague, Hanya.
Okay.
Paul
Strike two.
Thank you so much, Rochelle, and very, very nice to meet you all. My name is Hania Palacios Azami. We'll introduce the team momentarily, but really excited to have this time with you all this morning and be welcome into this group. And we'd love to just share a little bit about what we are working on and where we are and a little bit more about ourselves. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. And so we'll introduce a little bit of our partnership, some of the things that we've learned so far, and really our next steps. Next slide. So as Rochelle mentioned, we are led by the amazing Paul Hernandez. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but he is Fenton's Chief Strategy Officer. Paul is a native of LA and has been working on strategic communications and really providing a lot of guidance to organizations, nonprofits, state government, county governments, philanthropy. He's been in the space for a long time. And I know that he would have loved to have been here if he could. Also rounding out our team is Nicole Levy. She is based in the East Coast. And a little bit about myself. So I am a vice president with Fenton. I've been with Fenton for almost 3 years. I bring more than 18 years of strategic communications experience, have worked a lot with nonprofits, state government, and really helping, as Rochelle mentions, really helping organizations work on narrative change and telling their story and doing it in a way that is effective and true to the values of the work. I'm based in Tarzana. I have 2 young kids in elementary school, so expanded learning is definitely something that is near to me and to the work that we do. And I'll hand it over to Julio for a quick intro as well.
Good morning, everyone. Julio Spedias, Account Director here at Fenton Communications. Bring years of experience in communications, media relations, really how to tell the story, right, of organizations like ExpandLA that are doing amazing work in the ground to really, focus on transformative change. And that's really my experience before work coming to Fenton. I was at Community Coalition. Some of you may know the organization that Mayor Karen Bass started 33 years ago as a response to the crack cocaine epidemic in South Los Angeles. There managed the communications strategy for the organization, and now bring my skills to Fenton and to be able to work with organizations like ExpandLA, and really looking forward to this partnership that we're developing here to take the work that ExpandLA is doing to another level and really amplify the amazing work that ExpandLA is doing.
Thank you so much, Julio. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about Fenton. Fenton has been in business for 40 years. We're the first national communications agency that is really truly dedicated to social impact and social change. And so what that means and what that looks like is that we, as a communications agency, really only work with nonprofits and philanthropy and and government to really help folks tackle those big challenges, the societal challenges that we face, right? So everything from DEI to getting out the vote to working on, and I know uh, Jennifer talked a little bit about this. We work with the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, which is a $4.7 billion state of California youth mental health initiative. And so things like that. And we consider ourselves incredibly lucky to be able to be in this work that is very mission driven and supporting, the work that you all are doing. Truly, that's our mission. That is what we're here to do. A little bit more about what we do in the next slide, please. So we are a full service agency. What that means is that we do everything from branding to strategy to messaging to, as Rochelle mentioned, storytelling. How is it that we're putting together those stories that are really going to connect emotionally with folks, that are going to tell the true impact of the work that y'all are doing, and how can we build the capacity of coalitions and provide the tools and the resources that you all need to keep doing the amazing stuff that you're doing. So we are full service. We can provide a lot of different things, which is super exciting. And as Julio said, very thrilled to be partnering with ExpandLA on this important effort. So a little bit about, that work and the purpose of this work, as Rochelle mentioned, we are tasked with developing a communication strategic plan for ExpandLA that's really going to be a roadmap and a playbook for the approach and the sequence to gathering some of that legislative support. ExpandLA has already done a lot of great work. You all are doing a lot of great work. And how can we bring a cohesive message to it, right? What does that messaging look like that folks were talking about earlier, which is absolutely right. It's going to look different based on location. So we're doing a lot of work right now, talking to different folks and getting kind of those insights, and Julio's kind of gonna go into some of that approach. But really, our focus right now is on creating that communications campaign so that we can arm you all with the tools and resources and messaging that you're gonna need to make the case for legislators and build that momentum and keep the movement going. I'll hand it over to Julio.
Perfect. Thank you, Hanya. So in terms of our goal or our goals, really it's focused on securing legislative support, right, to fund equitable expanded learning programs, right, and in LA County, and of course the state, programs that provide, essential, enrichment opportunities for students, specifically those in underserved communities like South LA, Sela, the Valley, and other parts of the region. And this really requires a strategic, coordinated approach. And as part of this process, we will require your support as well as many. I see many familiar faces on this call. Many of you have interacted in the last couple of weeks. So that's really what the work that we're doing here. That's focused on developing a transformative narrative, a universally shared narrative that clearly defines what expanded learning is and why is it essential, and that conveys, right, why expanded learning is essential to addressing the needs, right, and the issues around disparities in funding, access, and really about creating systems change. Another element to our goal is to engage legislators in the area, and also partners like yourself. Your role as a partner is important in shaping policies and advocating and amplifying the work that is beneficial to our youth, to our students, to our families, and really elevating, right, conversations on sustainable funding and sustainable solutions. another element of our goal is to provide the partners with tools and resources around the messaging. Uh, as Hanya mentioned, toolkits, providing toolkits to help communicate right on the importance and advocate for expanded learning programs, equipping, community leaders like yourself and educators to serve as ambassadors, right, as validators that talk about these programs and the work that you're doing at the local level. And another element of our work, of the goals, is to, identify key legislators who can lead and be champions and advocates to support expanded learning programs and really highlight the needs of their constituencies at that local level. And part of that is developing tailored messaging and evidence, right? Data that builds the case for the prioritizing funding for ExpandLA. Next slide, please. So our approach is layered in various phases. Currently right now we're finalizing our research and discovery phase, which is phase one. And as I noted, as I shared, I've had conversations with many of you. Part of this phase includes stakeholder interviews. We've spoken with key stakeholders ranging from core staff to leadership from the ExpandLA team, including funders, other intermediaries, and also other partners where we've received great insights and had conversations on ExpandLA and expanded learning programs. We've conducted a communications audit where we reviewed internal, external documents from ExpandLA, from presentations, one-pagers, and brochures. We also conducted a power mapping exercise to identify and analyze the key legislative targets that will be impactful in terms of moving the needle when it comes to advocacy and funding. The next phase of our work is really focused on taking those insights from phase one and developing that communications strategy plan that will include the messaging narrative to really tell that story, to have that consistent story around not only ExpandLA, but also expanded learning programs. And that will include developing strategies to those target audiences, which are the legislators, across platforms and really maximizing the reach of the work or the campaign. Then the next phase is really developing that content, developing those high impact materials that's easy for partners to use and to share and advocate to join the conversation, which are those toolkits, those digital assets, graphics, and again, those key messages to really amplify the work, and developing case studies that talk about the real impact of expanded learning at that local level, at the state level, and demonstrating the importance of funding and why these programs are important. And we will conclude with phase four, which is implementation and execution phase, which is really bringing everything to life and taking implementation to the engagement element, which will launch a campaign, ensuring that the messages are reaching the right people, partners, legislators, other intermediaries, right? And really developing that support and calls to action. Next slide, please. So as a part of our phase, this first phase, we've held stakeholder interviews, as I noted, with staff, with funders, and other youth hub partners. Communication audit, as I mentioned, we've taken materials and really took a deep dive to understand how ExpandLA talks about the work and also ExpandLA programs. And as I noted, we engaged in a power mapping workshop where we identified key legislators. Next slide, please. So I'd like to share some very, very high level key insights that we've been able to glean from conversations that we've had with partners at the beginning of the year. And these are very high level. Just wanted to provide some key insights and tease some of the findings that we've captured. And the first one is there's a need to establish, right, a clear messaging framework, particularly around expanded learning programs and youth hubs. And really here is developing this framework to make sure that partners and stakeholders are speaking the same language, that there's a shared language that reinforces this vision of what expanded learning programs are. And here's a quote, everyone has their own idea of what expanded learning means, but without a shared understanding, it's hard to align or advocate effectively, right? So to the point is developing those shared that shared language so that we all are in sync, speaking about the same vision, the same goals, and then there is alignment. Other insight is really to create tailor messages for specific audiences. In this case, whether they're state legislators, decision makers, people that could be champions, right? Creating those customized messages with calls to action and being consistent, right? Regarding our efforts. And a quote here that from an interview, what resonates with a funder may resonate different with a parent or a teacher. We need messaging that speaks to their priorities, right? Really highlighting what they find important while also staying aligned with the bigger picture. And lastly, another key insight is providing support for organizations that don't necessarily have the capacity or the staffing, and really providing support for those smaller organizations. So equipping, partners with resources, training, and those advocacy tools to strengthen, impact and ability to be able to participate meaningfully when it comes to advocating and mobilizing, right? And to share the quote, smaller organizations often lack the resources to compete for grants or participate fully in coalition efforts, but their connection to the community is irreplaceable, right? A lot of these organizations are on the ground doing the work and really providing those services. So as Fenton, as we move our work along the next phase, will be focused on creating those messaging, the tailored approach to those target audiences, and to uplift, right, the work that partners are doing and creating that strong and unified voice. Next slide, please. So what's next? As I alluded to earlier, we will be going into our next phase, which is to develop the strategic communications plan, which will we focus on how do we engage and move key legislators into action based on the power mapping efforts that we've taken on. That includes, supporting the advocacy efforts that the coalition is doing, outlining approach for engagement, those calls to action, and identifying what communications tools you will need to be able to engage in those efforts, and really identifying how to develop a system, how to coordinate and be able to mobilize the network and the coalition when it comes to this communications plan. Next slide, please. So now this is more of a call to action to the network as we engage in the next phase of our messaging and strategic communications plan. We're actually seeking for your input and for your help in this process. So we're seeking 5 to 7 partners from the network to be part of our effort to provide your insights, your thoughts, as we develop these messaging tools. So the ask is, to help us provide your insights, work with us to create this messaging that addresses specific calls to action, and engage in making sure that the messaging that we're creating resonates, right? And help us improve as we develop these elements of the work. And we ask that you participate and commit to one meeting that'll be via Zoom, and it's really to make sure that messaging is inclusive and is really reflective of the diversity of the various communities that make up LA County. So if you're interested, please let us know and send an email to us at ExpandLA at Fenton.com. And we're looking forward to engaging with you all as we develop this plan. And that's it from our end.
Thank you so much, Julio. And I see some questions in the chat. Happy to answer those. So Anne, that is correct. So for this specific campaign, the audience is legislators, so the LA delegation to be more specific, and policymakers. Within some of the core messaging, of course, what we consider core messaging is that those key messages that are going to, as Julio was talking about, define and or explain expanded learning a little bit more. So there may be aspects of the campaign that can be used in other ways, but our focus really is, for right now, on legislators and policymakers. And we're absolutely open to any other questions or thoughts, feedback, things to keep in mind. And excited to work with you all and to bring you more information as we continue to put this together. We definitely need and want input. Y'all are the ones on the ground, and that's certainly something that we're hoping to capture and use.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Fenton. We are really, really excited to have them as a part of our narrative change work. So definitely, please email them if you're interested. Let us know if you're interested as well. You can contact any of our ExpandLA team and we'll connect you to Fenton if that might support your process as well. With that, we're gonna do some closing reminders and then a closing right after that. So really quickly, just reminding folks, we're gonna be sending out that assessment survey so that we can get an understanding of what advocacy work might look like when it comes to supporting you all with like funding resources. So look forward to that. We're also going to be sharing our advocacy committee information on how to sign up and more details. I'll also be adding some office hours just to make sure I can answer any additional questions that folks might have before you sign up for the committee. We're going to be having our Immigration Rights Summit at the end of the month as well. So look forward to that RSVP. And I'm going to be dropping in the chat just in case between now and our Immigration Rights Summit, if you are looking for opportunities to have more information on immigration rights spaces. A space that I know that is being made public is the LAUSD We Are One website, where you can find information on the recordings that LAUSD is doing on Know Your Rights for community members and families alongside Garrison. So just drop that link in the chat in case you are looking for those kinds of resources. I'm also going to be dropping their resource guide in case that's helpful. So just wanted to make sure you all had something to take away as well. For our ExpandLA bulletin, we created this bulletin to have a space where partners could update information that you think would be helpful for other partners, whether that's resources, workshops, sessions that might be helpful. So definitely go ahead and use that to start adding any kind of information you think would be helpful for the network. And if you could scan into this exit survey, we'll also share it in our email just in case. But we definitely want to hear if this was helpful, what could have been more helpful, if there's any other things that could support everyone on the topics that we talked about that we can start planning for. We want to hear your experience, your thoughts, and we want to make sure that we're connected with what's important to you all so that our work is really guided by our partners. For our last slide, sorry, I'm trying to stay hydrated in this weather. To honor and acknowledge Black History Month, we wanted to make sure to end our space highlighting a concept that came from an African proverb, which Nelson Mandela raised in a lot of his work. This concept might be familiar to some folks, and it is this concept of Ubuntu, which can be translated to I am because you are. So Nelson Mandela said in Africa, there's a concept known as Ubuntu, the profound sense that we are human only through the humanity of others, that if we are to accomplish anything in this world, it will be in equal measure. It will in equal measure be due to the work and achievement of others. And we are already a network that has chosen to come together to better our sector. And our community right now needs us to continue to come together even stronger and with an even more united front to raise their voices, to create safe spaces, and to advocate for policies and legislation that honors their humanity and our humanity. We have learned for generations that organizing, civil unrest, all of these efforts can only work when we work together instead of in silos. So we are really, really looking to continue to partner with you all to really advocate for the things that we know are important to the community, to your staff members, create the resources and tools that will continue to support the work that we know is really important for our youth, students, communities. So thank you all so much for taking time to join us. And we will keep you in the loop for future spaces and resources. Thank you all so much. Please fill out the exit survey. And with that, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Giving you all a couple minutes back.
You might want to put the QR code back on the screen. I think some people, if they are doing the survey.
Oh, you can do the next slide. It's actually in the next
There we
slide
go.
too.
Gotcha. Okay.
There
Thank
you
you,
go.
everybody. It's great to see everybody.
I just wanted to respond to the person I was talking to in the chat. Sorry, it's Alexis. But there was something someone had dropped in the chat and it said restricted. I'm not sure if it was like a PDF or something, but it was Dr.
Hi, I'm Dr. Day Youssef. I was
Hey.
sharing, with Empower of Them, they're doing a podcast for, I want to say it's 14 to 24. And so they're looking, it's going to be like a paid internship for our youth. And I thought I had done it appropriately for me to be able to post it, but it's not letting me do that. So I did send it to the ExpandLA email so that could be shared. That's going to be, they've already done the initial pilot. They've gotten a great turnout. Xavier's doing a great job over there. So I wanted to share that with you all.
I'm
Thank
able
you.
to open it actually.
I
I
don't
was
know for
able to
me.
open it, and that's Antelope Valley, by the way.
And we can
Yeah.
add it to the
Yes, that's
follow-up
Antelope
email
Valley.
as well. Yeah, we can add it to the follow-up email as well. Thank you so much for that resource.
Yes, thank you.
Alexis, do you think that was the one that you were trying to open?
Yes, for some reason it says access to file restricted by your account admin. I don't know what that means. I don't know why. I don't know. But thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thank you guys and have a great day.
You too. Thank you.